Hello, love. Okay, so I really want to ask you something. So sit down for this one. I really, really mean it. What are you certain about that you've never actually examined? It could be something big, it can be something small, it can be a way you see the world, a belief about what's possible for you. It can be a thing that feels like part of who you are, something that has lived inside your head for so long that it stopped feeling like a belief at all and it started feeling like reality. You know that feeling, right? We all have at least one belief or two that we might be confusing with the truth that shapes how we see the world. That thing right there. That's what this upcoming Uranus and Gemini transit is completely shattering. So on April 26th, Uranus moves into Gemini for the first time in 84 years. 7 years of the planet of disruption moving through the sign of the mind, communication, and the belonging that is birthed through that, right? And I've been sitting with this transit for a few weeks now because it is big. It is really big. And I also don't want to give you what everybody else is going to be giving you, because here's what everyone else is going to tell you. Uranus and Gemini is about AI. It's about communication, technology. It's about information, which, yes, all of that is true. Also, the easiest version of the teaching. And I think the actual work of this transit lives a few layers deep, 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 deep down underneath all that. Here's something that most people don't even know about Uranus. Every other planet in the solar system rotates upright, more or less at least. They spin on their axis the way a top spins, roughly aligned with the plane of the solar system. But Uranus, she's different. Uranus doesn't do it like the rest. Uranus rolls. Its axial tilt is 98 degrees. The planet is tipped on its side and it rotates on its side, going around the sun completely sideways. An almost radical middle finger to the rest of the solar system saying, nah, I'm not going to do it like y'all. I'm going to ask different questions. I'm going to rebel. And for 7 years or so, Uranus has been in Taurus, completely radicalizing how we view safety and security. Uranus shakes the foundation of every sign it occupies. And in Taurus, we saw massive shakeups in the themes of values, stability, and comfort. But now the cosmic conversation is shifting dramatically. Enter Uranus in Gemini, the chaos gremlin. So what is the actual work this transit is asking for? What is it asking of us? Well, I've been sitting with this phrase for a few weeks now, and I want to give it to you plainly. There's a difference between the idea of truth and truth itself. And most of us right now are living very deep inside the idea. We have inherited a way of thinking from family, from school, from the algorithms that decide what 30 seconds of footage shows up on your phone next, from the neighborhood you grew up in and the one you moved to, from the books you were told were important and the ones you never even heard of. Talking about the people at your job and the conversations you had at 3 different dinner tables last month. All of it all fed something into the motherboard that now runs in your head and tells you what's true, what's not, who's safe, what's possible, and what kind of person you are. And here's the part that gets uncomfortable. Most of the program running in your head was installed. You did not consciously choose it. It got there, and then it started feeling like you through the debugging process we call life. And somewhere along the way, you started mistaking the way you were taught to see the world for the way the world actually is. But I want to go one layer deeper than all of that, because this is where I think most of the teaching on this transit stops short. The dangerous part is not only that the program got installed. The dangerous part is that you're still running it every morning without checking. And with Uranus and Gemini, we're looking at the planet of disruption, shaking up the foundations of how we perceive our immediate environment. We're talking about fighting the habit of your own mind, the repressed thoughts you've had 10,000 times that you've never given yourself permission to even articulate. That declarative conclusion you've assumed so many times that you arrive at it before the question's even formed. These intellectual loops that we find ourselves in, demonizing our processes as if something was wrong with us, all of that is coming up to the surface. And here comes Uranus to shake up the shackles of our solitary confinement to free us from the systemic abuse of our own minds. And you see, there's a phrase that I keep returning to when I think about this transit as well, and what this transit is asking of us. The willingness to believe your own eyes. Because a lot of us have been seeing some real ass shit in this world, right? And then 3 seconds later, we check the perception against the consensus and we edit it down to what's safe to think. The impulsive thought gets softened somewhere, rounded off, made agreeable. But Uranus in Gemini is the disruption of that editing. Uranus wants you to stop flinching when you notice the thing you're not supposed to notice. He wants to liberate your mind from the illusory limits of social conformity. Uranus says, fuck being right against whose standards? Know thyself and think for yourself, okay? Now, the very first degree Uranus enters is governed by a tarot card, of course, which for this decan of Gemini, we're talking about the 8 of Swords. And I think this image is perfectly poignant. 8 of Swords, a figure, blindfolded, bound, standing in a ring of swords. She looks trapped, but here's what people miss when they read the card. The ropes are loose. The swords are standing at a distance. Nothing is even touching her. She could walk out of there whenever she wants to, but she doesn't. She can, but she won't, because leaving would mean not knowing. Leaving would mean putting herself in a room where the old certainties don't apply. And certainty, even when it's painful, is easier than the terror of not knowing what's actually true. That's the condition Uranus arrives to address. We have more information than any generation in history. We are literally drowning in it. And the real problem are the unchecked certainties we carry that we've never actually questioned. That's what the blindfold is. Self-chosen, familiar. So familiar, it stopped feeling like a blindfold and it started feeling like the shape of your face. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because with Gemini, or with any air sign, we're talking about perception. How the mind takes in the world, what it lets in, what it edits out, what it calls real, and each of the 3 air signs perceives differently. Libra is cardinal air, perception that initiates through the other person. Libra perceives through the contrast of self and other. You cannot see yourself clearly until another person holds that mirror up to you, right? Aquarius, fixed air, perception that anchors into the bigger pattern. Anchors, fixed. Aquarius perceives the tension between the one and the many, the individual and the collective. I'm talking about the rebel and the room the rebel occupies. And then there's Gemini, mutable air, the air that moves. Gemini perceives the world in a scattered way. As a baby air sign, they're at the very beginning of putting all the pieces together, where every answer opens another question. Every person contains another person. Every truth has a cousin truth standing right next to it. Gemini's perception is plural by design, which is gorgeous when the ground is stable, right? But can also feel like you're losing your damn mind when the ground stops being stable. And when that mutable perception meets a world where the old certainties have been lifted, well, you begin to see everything and its opposite. Now you're tracking 17 live versions of the truth of a story at once. And the guardrails, molded and shaped by social conformity, those terms and conditions that used to tell you which version of the story is real, well, all of a sudden, it's gone. That's the edge Uranus is about to walk us toward for 7 years at that. And so where Gemini eventually lands, if it lands well, is here. Sanity is a choice. And the line between what makes a person sane and what makes a person not sane is partly defined by the people we surround ourselves with. Stay with me on that, because it's the thing that makes Uranus and Gemini move from an inner personal transit to a collective political one. Gemini rules the third house, naturally, in astrology, the neighborhood, the immediate circle, the people close enough to be in your life every single day. And the way the third house works in practice is this. The people you are in conversation with define the boundary of what's thinkable. And thinkable is a different thing than true. Thinkable is what shows up as a real option when you sit down to choose how you want to live your life. If every person you know thinks one thing and you start thinking another thing, your nervous system will tell you that you're losing your mind, because the community that confirms and affirms your sanity is the community that shares your reality. But when you stop sharing that reality, those beliefs, those conditions, then you stop feeling sane. And this is where most people eventually retreat or stay in that circle, even though it's taking a lot of energy from them. And if you end up retreating, I say good riddance. It's for good reason. I would say thank God for the clarity, because this is the piece of the Uranus teaching I don't think enough people really even talk about. Uranus has a shadow figure inside him, the trickster. And the trickster does not fight you. He does not argue with you. He doesn't show up in some uniform. He fills the room with people who seem happy with the way things are. He arranges the meeting so that the person leaving looks like the stupid one. He makes conformity feel reasonable, practical, financially wise even. You can't fight a system, love. It is what it is. That's the whisper he plants in your ear. And over time, you stop remembering what you actually believe in anymore. Not because anyone took it from you, but because the room got arranged with so much illusory and convenient influence that we forget. But at some point or another, we eventually wake up from this tantalizing slumber, and this is where Uranus enters Gemini, perfectly timed, like an alarm clock, disrupting the third house for everybody, putting unfamiliar voices in front of you, keeping the glass bottom of the boat shifting so you can't quite rest in the same consensus you've been resting in for the last decade. The work is to stay in the disruption long enough to find a deeper and more personal connection to sanity and truth. The kind of curiosity that holds even when the people around you stop agreeing with you. The kind of discerning awareness that can only come from contrast and contact with that contrast. And I gotta be honest with you, because I'm in this too. I have people in my life who I am deeply in love with. People I would show up for in any emergency, who also think about the world very differently than I do. And for a long time, the move was to avoid the places where we don't agree, and to keep the conversation safe and to avoid friction, because the friction absolutely made me question my own center. And that was scary as hell. But during this big shift that myself and everybody included are experiencing, we're learning to sit in that tension. We're learning to let the conversations not end with a period, but more of an ellipsis, which is the Geminian medicine, honestly. Conversations that don't end, conversations that open, conversations that leave you walking around feeling changed. That's what this transit is going to ask of all of us, staying in the room long enough to let the disagreement teach you something about yourself. All right? This next part is the one I keep wanting to soften, and I'm going to say clean instead of like dancing around it. I want us to go back and look at the Eight of Swords again, that figure who's blindfolded, right? She is a person whose identity has been organized around being the good Gemini twin, the reasonable one, the thoughtful one, the one who would never do that. And the blindfold is what makes that story possible, because the moment you take the blindfold off, you see something uncomfortable. Now, what Gemini is showing us is that you contain both twins. There is a part of you that could have built the atomic bomb, probably. And there's a part of you that can use AI for good, while there's a part of you that could use it for harm. You have the capacity to do both, to be both. That's what it means to be human. Both. Paradox. this and that. And what Uranus and Gemini is offering is a way of seeing both. The twin you like and the twin you've been trying to kill off. And then with your eyes open to choose which one you're going to feed today, tomorrow, and the day after. The goal here is knowing that you are actually choosing. Moral superiority is a completely different game. It needs an enemy. Conscious choice doesn't. Moral superiority is a person who organized their entire identity around being the good one. The person who can't see their own twin, the other twin, and who ends up weaponizing their goodness. That's one shadow of Gemini. The other shadow, and Uranus and Gemini is famous for it, is the contrarian. The person who, the second consensus forms, disagrees with it. And it's not because they've actually thought about it or actually thought it through, but because disagreeing has become the thing that makes them feel like they're thinking for themselves. This is where non-conformity becomes its own kind of conformity. You can run from one program straight into another program, dressed up in revolutionary clothes, and mistake the costume change for freedom or doing the right thing. Now, the deeper version of that shadow is what happens when you get so good at thinking critically that you stop feeling anything at all. Pure cognition, pure argument, pure suspicion. You can argue anything, and yet you believe nothing. And one day you look up and you realize, fuck, I'm completely alone. You liberated your mind from every community and forgot that real freedom includes having a body, being in contact, having people, having something you would actually commit to. That's the Uranus and Gemini shadow at its worst. It's not some fascist, right? But a smart, lonely person who mistook being unconvinced for being free. So the work, of course, with Gemini is both seeing the twin that moral superiority hides and seeing the twin that pure suspicion hides. Neither of those is thinking for yourself. Both of them are still running someone else's program, right? Just from completely different angles. And here's why all of this matters politically, because something happens when you can see your own shadow twin in all the shapes. You stop organizing your identity around being exclusively the good one or exclusively the one who sees through everything. And this is where you can actually extend some empathy to the people across the room who are living the part of your life that you've rejected, while still holding on to your values the whole time. That's the move. Recognizing that the person you are most afraid of is the long ignored other you. And the truth is that we all have this capacity to be both. We have the capacity to be the liberator and the bigot, which means the one person sitting across the table from you is not some different extraterrestrial species. They're a person who made different choices about which part of themselves to feed. That's the bridge building we have to get behind. Because when you can see your own shadow, you can see theirs. And you can still fight for what you believe in. I'm not saying do not resist. But if we're going to resist, let's resist from a different place. A more intentional place. A place that isn't so fickle or fragile. Now, before I close this out, there's something about the last 7 years that I keep coming back to. We got to remember that Uranus spent 7 years in Taurus, and that was about rootedness, values, knowing what you stand for, what you won't compromise on. I'm talking about the ground beneath your feet here, right? And some of that work was real and absolutely necessary. The last 7 years really shook up our beliefs and values in some very real and needed ways. But some of those values have become calcified. The roots have gotten hard. They stopped reaching. The thing that was supposed to hold us up became a wall that we are now using to defend against the world. So we gotta be careful here going into the next 7 years that the defined values don't stop us from curiously entertaining contrast. That's what Gemini is bringing to all of that Taurus work. The roots don't go away. Instead, they stretch and they reach some new, unfounded terrain. The goal here isn't to be unmovable, but rather to be malleable and stretchable with our truths and our exploration of those truths. All right? Well, there you have it. Now, remember, this is a 7-year window. It's not forever. So trust that whatever old certainty you're carrying is still paying rent somewhere. And during these 7 years, we'll figure out where it's leaking, right? At some point, that rent is going to stop being affordable. The question isn't whether the doorways are there. They're there. They're here. The question is whether you walk through one of them. So can we learn to see all of these parts of self with this transit? Can we let our values breathe without abandoning them? And can we stay in the contrast long enough for it to teach us something? That's the whole transit. So what mental process is actually holding you hostage right now? Which thought, which certainty, which piece of yourself are you protecting by not asking questions? I strongly encourage every person in this space right now to think, what questions am I not asking? And to ask that question from a place of curiosity, from a place of inner child wonderment, and to allow your relationships, your connections with others to be a living manifestation of what answering those questions look like. Look, you don't need an answer today. Walk around with these questions and really let Uranus roll in sideways to see what shows up. All right, my love? Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. Please join my private membership community, The Collective, where you get horoscopes, workshops, and a private community to integrate all this astrological wisdom with. I love you. I'll see you in the next one. We got a full moon coming up, which, she's going to be spicy. She's going to be stinging. Come on, Scorpio. I'll see you in the next one. Share, subscribe, all the things. Y'all already know what to do. Lo vemos.